Gotcha. And apparently you've lost your razor? Is it November yet? All right.
The weather's changing. He's putting
Maybe
his
that's it.
coat
All
on.
right, we'll good evening. It is October the 15th at 5:15 p.m. and the Board of Town Commissioners work session meeting is now in order, and I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Whoops, there we go. There you go. 2 seconds. And I understand, Mr. Hopkins, that there's an amendment to the agenda this evening?
Just a quick one, Madam Chair, and it really doesn't alter the agenda too much. Under item 8, letters C and D, I would like to reverse them, make letter D C and C D. It may not appear to have much impact, but it'll make more sense when Mr. Small and I talk later.
All right.
Thank you.
With that amendment, do we have a motion to amend, I suppose, the agenda?
I would move to adopt that amendment.
And a second on that?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we're going to vote on the amendment. Mr. Krantz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A vote on this evening's amended agenda for October 15th, 2024. Commissioner Rutledge,
Aye.
Commissioner Chismar,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner Chance,
Aye.
and Chair Edding.
Aye.
The amended agenda is approved.
Actually, I think we approved the amendment, and now we're going to vote
Oh.
on the agenda as amended.
Okay. The vote on the amended agenda, that was previously the vote for the amendment. So the Commissioner Rutledge,
Aye.
Commissioner Chismar,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner Chance,
Aye.
and Chair Edding.
Aye.
The agenda is now approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krantz. And first, we have a presentation on adult drug court from the Honorable Judge Kevin Mahoney.
Good evening. It's a little bit of old home week. It's been over 9 years since I appeared before the town commissioners, and many of you, almost all of you, I know in one form or another in either my prior life, social or professional, or my current life, professional. I know all the commissioners with the exception of Commissioner Taylor, although I think you know my son, Brendan. So there you go.
It's
Run the
a
table.
very small town.
I know you're very busy tonight, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'm sort of on my public speaking tour. I've had an opportunity to talk to the county administration, the county council, the county executive, as well as the various departments of the county as it pertains to adult drug court, and it was brought to my attention that it might be beneficial to share some of this information with the municipalities in addition to the county. And so that's my purpose tonight. I have good news and bad news. I'm going to start with the bad news. I'm not going to ask you what you want to hear first because it'll screw up my presentation. The bad news is that we have a horrible, horrible drug problem in our country. I know that that comes as no surprise to any of you, and Bel Air is not exempt from that problem. The good news that I present to you tonight is that by having 2 functioning drug courts in our county, and I say that because I have had the pleasure of managing the Circuit Court Drug Court since 2018, and Judge Carey, who many of you know as being one of your predecessors on the town commission, has run the district court drug court for even longer period of time, and both of them continue to flourish. And so the good news is that we offer drug court to our citizenry as an option and an additional tool in the fight against the drug epidemic that we currently experience. What it is not, and what I do not come before you suggesting, is that it is the solution, that I have figured out the problem with drugs and I know how to fix it. That is not the case. This problem is too big and too intractable for there to be a single solution, or somebody would have thought of it much smarter than me prior to this. What we need is as many, and a judge once looked down on me and told me this when I was an attorney and said, Mr. Mahoney, I am given as a judge a very crude set of tools to address the problems of our society. And that's true. And what we present to you is that drug court offers an option, a tool, a means by which for some people we can address this and that we can create a path to long-term recovery. And whether your focus and interest in this is on dealing with the criminal aspect of drug addiction or the medical aspect of drug addiction or the societal aspect or even the financial and economic aspect of the drug addiction problem that we have, I would suggest to you that drug court provides an option and a tool. Statistically, 60% of people who are charged with a crime will reoffend within 3 years. Statistically, 80% of people charged with a crime will reoffend within 10 years. I sometimes suggest that we all have heard at one point or another the definition of insanity, and that is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different or better result. And to some extent, that is unfortunately what we see in the criminal justice system when the criminal behavior is driven by addiction, that simply sending people to jail, putting people on probation, and then telling them to go and change their lifestyle and their behaviors doesn't always work, and it certainly doesn't work when somebody is suffering from the disease of addiction because it affects their brain. And we who don't suffer from that disease can very easily say, well, it's obvious that this is the right way to do something, but they can't understand and incorporate that. And while we certainly, and I on a daily basis, have to weigh how we deal with people from a public safety standpoint, there is also the aspect of rehabilitation and avoiding future contact with the system. And when you take into consideration the cost of incarceration, the cost of foster care, the medical realities of addiction, whether we're talking about the medical realities of the addict or the impact on children, for example, newborns who are suffering from the consequences of their parents' addiction, to the long-term mental health needs of the community, which oftentimes falls to us as the citizenry to ultimately pay the cost of. So whether we're talking about incarcerating somebody, and again, I know that in the political world, maybe not in your political world given your issues, but in the political world, you know, lock them up and throw away the key, it plays well. It makes for a good soundbite. But when you then turn around and say to that person who says that, well, we need to expand the jails, and we'd like to build one behind your house, then you'll hear about it. And so what we are trying to do in drug court is offer some people an alternate path that produces results. I provided through Mr. Hopkins some documents about our drug court, identifying the team, the application process, and how the program works. It is a 4-phase program. Each phase has a different intensity, it has a different length of time, but all told, the program takes anywhere from a year to 18 months to complete. Participants come into the program either because they have new charges and they've been identified as an appropriate case because their criminal charges seem to be driven by their addiction, or they're violating probation that they're already on, and that violation seems to be driven by their addiction. They can be referred by their attorney. They can be referred by the state's attorney's office, the prosecutor's office. They can be referred by the Department of Parole and Probation. We have a representative on our team from the detention center on behalf of the Sheriff's Department, so they can be referred from the detention center. and they can be referred by other judges, particularly, again, in terms of violations of probation. So somebody may come before one of our other judges and say, this person clearly is acting based on their addiction. I'm going to transfer the case over to drug court and see what we can do with it. The team comes from all aspects of the system. It is truly a team approach, and when we take somebody into drug court, we try to tailor a treatment program for them which meets their specific needs rather than somewhat of a cookie cutter, one size fits all, well, you'll just do this. We try and figure out what they need, whether it be inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, in the community, possibly living in a sober living environment. Sometimes we have occasion to send them out of the jurisdiction, meaning out of Harford County, for a limited period of time until they can complete treatment and come back. But they come and see me in court twice a month. So 24 times a year, they see me, and we have a discussion. And hopefully, that discussion is a positive one, that they are making good progress, and we talk about the progress, we talk about the challenges they face, we try and adjust their treatment and reporting requirements to acknowledge the realities of how they're going through the program, and we operate on an incentive and sanction model. And some people look at this and may think that this is strange because it's different. Different can be strange, but different sometimes is just different. And statistically and scientifically, we have evidence which establishes that having this limited sanction and incentive process works. The most simplistic things, we actually have a wheel like you would have at the carnival in my courtroom. Other courts do it different ways. They have a jar you pick things out of. But if somebody's compliant with the requirements of drug court over the last couple of weeks, when they come in and appear in front of me, they actually get to spin the wheel. And then sometimes they get something of a tangible nature. They might get called first the next time. They might get to skip a hearing. But one of the things that is on most of the judges who use wheel, and is on mine, and when I first started, I thought, well, this is kind of ridiculous. One of the things is shake hands with the judge. I thought, well, who cares? There's also a wild card on the wheel. So it lands on the wild card. They can pick any of the incentives that they are entitled to. And you wouldn't believe how many times they say to me, I'd like to shake hands with the judge. And I go, okay. You've got to recognize, we live in this world of everybody gets a trophy. All our kids. Used to be you only won a trophy when you won a championship or something like that. Now, you get a trophy for showing up. Even if you don't show up, they'll drop the trophy off at your house because you missed the trophy presentation. These folks have never gotten any kind of recognition. Many of them. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but many of them have not gotten any acknowledgement or any recognition for accomplishing anything. And so the idea that they just want to shake hands with the judge or receive a round of applause is another thing that we do, is something that we might find somewhat ridiculous, but they don't find that way, and that it encourages them to make it through the next couple of weeks to get to that next level. And on a sanction side, the one sanction which empirically we are told to try and use as little as possible, if we can, in order to balance with public safety, is incarceration. And I will tell you, it's one of the things that I sometimes struggle with, because I oftentimes have people in front of me who clearly have relapsed, they're clearly using, they may not be committing new crimes, but I'm worried about them. They're a danger to themselves. And I'm trying to get them a bed in a treatment facility, but I'm not going to be able to get them a bed until next Monday. And I think that the safest thing for them is to send them to the detention center until I can do that. the science, and we get evaluated annually by the national people, and they put the best practices in front of us and say, do you do these things? And one of them is, avoid that. And it's one of the things that I struggle with, because the problem is that some of these courts in some jurisdictions have, all the resources in the world. Montgomery County, you know how it is, Chief. Montgomery County, you can do anything in Montgomery County because they got money for it, they got programs for it. Harford County, and we don't have those things, and so I'm left with the limited tools that I have. And so I admit to you that sometimes, because I think that it is the safest thing for somebody, I may hold them a couple of days. But I do other things in addition to that. The most common is increasing their treatment, increasing their reporting, making sure that they're attending a number of AA or NA meetings on a regular basis. I sometimes require them to write an essay on something. If, for example, they weren't truthful in their interaction with the team, I might have them write an essay. I've had them write letters to their children about something that they're grappling with. I've had participants ask me if they could go to jail instead of writing the essay. That's how much they would prefer not to do it. But that's how it functions. And in 6 years since we initiated the program, we now have, as of our graduation in September, we now have 40 graduates. Now, some of you might look at that and say, well, that's 40 people, it's not a lot. I agree with you, it's not. Part of that is driven by the numbers that we can accommodate. Our grant funding from the state of Maryland generally is contemplating that we have approximately 20 participants at any one time, and that number fluctuates depending on where people are in the program. So part of its function is that. Part of it is how intensive the program is. It's not intended. These are not people who are dabbling in marijuana. These are people who have had several prior unsuccessful contacts with the criminal justice system. We've tried the traditional approach. It has not worked. Well, we could send them back to prison and try it again, but we're probably going to get the same result. So we've identified these people. So while 40 is not a tremendous number in total, it is reflective of how difficult the program is and our constraints as far as financing goes. Of that 40, our present recidivism rate, again, I remind you, 60% within 3 years reoffend, 80% reoffend within 10 years. At present, the recidivism rate of our court is 10%. So only 4 of the 40 people have received new charges. Now, sadly, because again, this is not a panacea, I've had 3 of my graduates die of overdoses since, so obviously they relapsed. And so it is not the be-all and end-all. But I believe that it is an opportunity for us to provide resources. And one of the most pressing reasons that I wanted to come before you, and particularly for Chief Moore to hear about this, is because when I was starting the drug court program, I was able to travel to a suburb of St. Louis for training. And I specifically asked, I said, we are a suburb of Baltimore. I said, so I'd like you to send me to a similar styled court because I don't want to see how they're doing it in an urban setting or in a rural setting. I want to do something similar. And that judge told me that one of the most encouraging signs that he saw in his experience was over the years, and his drug court had been operating for 20 plus years, over the years that local law enforcement saw the benefit because they see what I'll refer to euphemistically as the usual suspects. They saw those people who reside in our town who seem to be part of the revolving door that are constantly coming in and constantly picking up charges. And the local police, unlike maybe the state police or even the sheriff's office, may not be as personally familiar with these folks and their background and their story and their situation. And it affords an opportunity for the local law enforcement to identify and say to the prosecutor's office, hey, this person might be a good fit for drug court. So, I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. The good news part is that a lot of times when we come before you, that there's an ask, and there's not. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking you for anything other than that you be aware of this program, that you keep the program in mind, that you share when people talk to you, as I'm sure they do as elected officials, and lament the systemic problems we have in our society and our community, and you're sitting here like, what am I supposed to do as the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners to address it? That you at least make people aware that this resource is available to our citizenry, and that you might be able to suggest it to somebody, a parent, a spouse, who might be able to pass it along to the appropriate party in the criminal justice system, that we may identify people. Because in the end, these are people's children, they're their spouses, their parents, and I'm very proud of the fact that of those 40 people that I've graduated, that the vast majority of them are now productive, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. So I thank you, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you had.
My question is, how long has your drug court been operating in Hartford
Since
County?
2018.
Since 2018.
Yeah.
So it's a fairly good run. So you have some
And
good statistics.
All
to
but
show.
one jurisdiction in the state. Garrett County is the only one that does not have a drug court. Every other jurisdiction has at least. There's drug court, there's some jurisdictions have a specifically assigned DUI court. There's a veterans court. There's a mental health court. We have district court has a mental health court. So there's a number of problem-solving courts, but all of the jurisdictions, albeit minus one, have one operating.
And even besides the burden that it places on public safety, there are so many in our community who have substance abuse problems and haven't made it to court because they haven't committed any crimes, but it is a terrible thing to be in the grips of. I personally have a friend whose son died from a fentanyl overdose. He had been to rehab. He left rehab early. She was concerned about him, but, you know, what can you do when you have an adult? He was 21 years old, and he relapsed and died. And I'm sure he never entertained that possibility when he started down the road to addiction. He never made any appearances in criminal court, but that family's just destroyed.
Absolutely.
It's a terrible, terrible problem. So thank you for what you're doing, and I certainly hope you have continued success.
Your Honor,
Yes.
real quick, we have a program here. I think you're familiar with it.
LEAD
And I've
program?
looked at all of your, yes, sir, all of your documents, and I think it's a fantastic, again, like you make reference, it's another tool in the toolkit. And we use ours kind of like the same way to divert, to try to use a diversionary program for low-level crimes and for those suffering from substance use disorder. But we'll use the state's attorney's office. And I recently received a presentation from Judge Carey, too, and I was very impressed. It's a very noble effort. I applaud you for taking another approach that doesn't go the traditional route. And I think that's the way we all have to start looking at this problem. You know, you've been in the judicial system for a long time. I've been in law enforcement. And you see that when you're constantly arresting the same people over and over again and you're not making a difference with them, that something different, you have to do something different to try to help them. Like you say, they have family members and you don't want to see people die. So I think that the direction you're taking is very noble. I'd really like to maybe partner and collaborate with you and Judge Carey and maybe see how we could get our program to work alongside yours to maybe even make it even stronger and maybe try to save some more lives. And 40, you said 40 people you've influenced? That's an incredible number.
My deputy in my courtroom, who's actually a retired Baltimore County police officer, and you know, everybody comes and brings their own experiences. So somebody who's spent an entire career in law enforcement has certain views. And he came up to me after one of our drug court sessions, was in my chambers and joked with me, and he says, "You know, damn it, you make me start caring about these people." And that's the problem, is that all of us, whether it's law enforcement or the court, I see people come before me, and I have them in front of me for 15 minutes maybe, and I make decisions about them, and off they go.
Yep.
And I may never hear about them again, or I may, but it's only the bad things. And so it really struck home with me when he made that observation, because when you deal with them on a day in, day out basis for this length of time, they become a person, which is what they obviously are. And it's easier to deal with them on a personal level, but it's harder because sometimes it's not successful,
Yeah.
and that really keeps you up at night. So,
Thank
So-
you for what you're doing.
Okay.
thank you.
Judge Mahoney, what's limiting the enrollment? Is it you said it was mainly funded by
But-
grant money?
We get grant money from the state of Maryland, and when, in our grant application, we apply for numbers that would support roughly 20 people in the program at any given time. Sometimes, I think right now, we're down to 15 because we just graduated a group of people. So we're trying to get the numbers back up. I've never gotten to 20 and said, okay, well, I'm not gonna take 21. But generally, that's what we try and keep it with. And that makes it manageable for the team and also for my docket.
Right.
Cecil County at present has a drug court with 100 participants. Now, if Cecil County can have 100 participants, I mean, no offense, just by population, if they can have 100 people, then it would seem like we would be able to have more. But the judge who's presiding over that is literally sitting all day, 1 day a week. So I think Fridays, that's all that judge does. Judge Curtin is tolerating me doing it one morning, twice a month. If I tell her I need to go all day, there may be problems. I may need the help of law enforcement. But until we can accommodate really larger group,
Right.
I think we need to keep it where we are.
And then how is Judge Carey's program working?
His is doing well too. His numbers tend to be a little bit lower than mine in terms of actual participants. And one of the things we've been trying, because sometimes, whether it's attorneys or not, there tends to be some gamesmanship played, and we're trying to ensure that people don't bring their district court cases that should stay in district court up to circuit court and then say we want to be in drug court. I say, well, there's a drug court down in district court. Judge Carey has one. You can be in that one, to try and, because the circuit court is overwhelmed with the kind of cases that circuit courts hear, and we can't be taking on district
Right.
court cases too. But
And
that's
the
a problem.
the difference between those are basically kind of like misdemeanors
Yeah.
versus felons?
Yeah,
Okay.
that-
The crimes
That
that
even
they're,
though they're entitled to a jury trial based on the amount of potential exposure that they have, that sometimes, whether it's judge shopping or otherwise, but again, I've been very clear to people that I've not heard that Judge Carey was somebody that people were trying to avoid.
Right.
So we both have room in our programs to accept more people.
well, we all try to avoid judges, but anyway.
Say again.
We all try to avoid judges. We don't want to be in front. But that's a
Given the
good way of
choice of
being.
judges, they're not avoiding Judge
Right.
Carey.
Okay.
Your Honor, I have one
Yes.
question. You talk about adult drug court. Is there an age restriction?
Yeah, they've got to be charged with an adult offense.
Okay.
So there is not a juvenile drug court in Harford County at present.
Was there at one time?
I'd be lying if I told you the answer for sure. There may have been some diversionary programs, but I don't know that it was specifically identified as a drug court.
That may be more what I'm thinking about, the diversionary program for teens. But
There's a family recovery court presently in the juvenile system, but that deals with children that are in foster care, like child in need of assistance cases.
I
And so
see.
there is a similar setup as far as a team approach to trying to reunify those families, but it is not specifically address. Most of it deals with the addictions or other problems associated with the parents as opposed to the children.
I see. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Chance is remembering correctly. I don't know if it was actually called drug court, but Judge Carr had a juvenile court. I don't know if it was diversionary, and I don't know if it was limited to drugs, but many of the participants had
14.
some, were teens and had drug issues.
And Judge Carr also had a drug court years ago, but his drug court was really more of a entry level, where people, like the first time that they'd gotten a charge. And so that
Yeah.
long since has passed.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I just wanted to see, could you give us a sense of the proportion between the types of crimes? Let me just put a couple categories out here. One would be a controlled substance-oriented crime that did not involve a property crime or violence, property crimes, or personal violent crimes.
So I'll break it up into two categories. We generally avoid violent crimes, although there are exceptions to that. I'll give you an example. We have taken somebody into drug court where they had committed domestic violence. Their spouse acknowledged that their domestic violence is driven, in their belief, by their addiction, and the spouse wanted them in drug court. I've also taken cases where the crime of violence is not the case that's before me, but they may have something way in their past, assaultive behavior or something like that. But certainly any current crimes of violence are going to be looked at. It's going to be a hard sell for those to come in. But the other types of crime, there's certainly, obviously, the CDS charges themselves, but then there are also the thefts and the burglaries that may be associated with a drug addiction. And so that is heavily, I would say drug charges themselves, thefts and burglaries form the primary basis of any new charges. On violations of probation, it could be almost anything, but it's the violation itself. Either they've tested positive, they've sort of cut and run from supervision because they're using that might bring them in.
And my next question, Your Honor, is put you on the spot a little bit, I guess, but your sense from the defense bar, the public defender's office, different from the private defense bar thinking, and then the buy-in from the state's attorney's office. Could you just, I don't want you to name names or pick on people, but just give
I will
us a
tell
sense
you.
of what, have you seen growth in that since 2018?
I was a
the
little bit
collaboration?
disappointed. I was a little bit disappointed because I thought that selling this to the public defender and to a certain extent the private defense bar too would be an easier sell. I had a public defender, I won't name names, no longer there, who said, my job is to get my client out of jail as fast as I can. My job is not to be their social worker, not to fix all their problems. It's sort of a bit of an assembly line. Next, let me deal with this. I don't want to deal long term. I'm focused on the short term. But I think over the years that I've gotten more buy-in because they see the results and they see how we operate. From a state's perspective, again, it was a bit of a hard sell because there are some who just don't buy into the ideas. There are some people, if you don't accept that drug addiction is a disease, if you decide it's a choice or a moral failure or something like that, then it's going to be hard for me to prevail upon you as to this concept. But if you agree that it is a disease, albeit that sometimes results in criminal behavior, then you got to treat it as a disease. And we don't tell people, I'm type 2 diabetic, okay? I eat all sorts of things I'm not supposed to eat, okay? But my doctor doesn't say to me, well, look, get out. I'm not going to treat you anymore because you're not following my instructions. You might say you've got to have more treatment. You know, if they had told me years ago that if I didn't eat better, I was going to have to give myself insulin, which I don't have to yet. But if I don't stop doing what I'm doing, I may have to give myself insulin. Well, you know, it's the same thing with addiction. We've got to keep trying to address the disease, but very rarely does putting somebody in a cell with a lack of any kind of programs or anything, although the detention center now has a medically assisted treatment program, but we get the results that we expect to get. And so this is an opportunity to address it in a different way.
Well, I commend you, Your Honor, for beginning with, I think, is one of the most persuasive points of when you approach it from the recidivism analysis. I think it would be hard pressed for anybody really deep down to say that they wouldn't want people to stop committing crimes. And so when you start with that, and you did, I think that's very persuasive, and I would think it'd be hard to find anybody here in the Bel Air community that hasn't had a personal impact in their family or people that they know or loved ones with the problems with the drug addiction, and then what that leads to, and so I commend you for the work you do. I hope that you find a way to get more than a morning every 2 weeks. But you know, we're just in front of Judge Ishak this morning was saying that this is one of the busiest dockets in the state, if not for per capita judges in courtrooms. Do you agree with that?
We're statistically eligible for 2 additional judges and 2 additional magistrates. We just don't have any place to put them.
Yeah.
So we're never going to get them until they have courtroom space to address that.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. I've really have found this very informative and encouraging.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I very much appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Judge Mahoney, and you're certainly welcome to come back, but I know Chief Moore's door is always open, and he's working really hard with Chip to have people take a different path and not appear in your courtroom. All right, next we have the Town Administrator's Report. Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to Judge Mahoney's presentation, on October the 4th, all the commissioners should have in their inbox a copy of the read-ahead materials, but if you didn't get them, let me know. I can resend them to you. Have a number of things, mostly awareness issues for you more than anything. The Army's 250th parade proposal that I talked about at our last work session, they have canceled. There's too many conflicts going on and too many resources needed, and I think the Veterans Office is getting pulled a number of different ways. So they're going to move in a different direction, most likely a musical venue or using the musical venue that weekend to support military music and honor the military through music. So more to follow on that, but the parade is a no-go. You did receive an email from me, but the Thomas Street project is underway. If you've driven down there in the last couple of days, you will notice they've already started some work. So just be aware of that in case you get inquiries from your constituents. I'm sure the chief will report out on it later. We did not get a chance to talk about it, but I am fairly certain the barbecue bash was a success. Town was packed, the various vendors, fairs. It was quite a busy Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in town. A lot of people in town. So the economic engine, I'm sure, was purring quite along. Received an invitation today from the Army Alliance annual breakfast. I did not get a chance to forward it to you, but I will. But because of the budget donation, the budget that we've allotted them, that entitles the commissioners to two tickets to attend this event based on that contribution. So I will send this to the commissioners and to see who would like to attend.
I'm pretty sure that I saw that. I haven't actually read the whole email, but I think the title was that. I don't know if everyone got it, but certainly forward it.
There was 2 that came out today. One came from the Harford County Chamber and one came directly from the Alliance to me. So I'm not sure which one or if you received both, but I'll make sure that you get that by close of business tomorrow. The breakfast is November 21st, 8 to 10 at Rivers Watch at Water's Edge. Registration is required by noon. I'll send that out to you as quickly as possible. Mr. Hayden, you had reached out to me over the weekend about the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Correct.
Chief Moore was invited to that. I think the email that went to him also went to former Town Administrator Bain. So the chief shared my information with her, and I got an official invitation today, which I can send you.
I did get an invitation, but I know that I am busy and I've forgotten the date. It's in October.
Yes, it is October 26th. I will send
October
it to all the
26th.
commissioners.
Right, because I know I will not be able to attend, if anyone else can attend and would like to,
I will be there, ma'am.
I know the chief
Yes,
will
sir.
be there
Yes, ma'am.
representing
Yep.
us.
The event itself is a 4-hour event from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. according to the invitation. I too am committed tentatively that day. I may be able to free up, but I will send that to all the commissioners for their review. Received an email from Mike Blum, and which I forwarded also to the commissioners for Celebrity Grocery Bagging and at Klein's and Festival. If you recall, they used to do that at all the Klein's, including the one in Bel Air, which is most appropriate for us, but they've now limited it to that particular store. All the commissioners should have that in their inbox. If you don't, let me know. But that's Thursday, November the 7th at 10 a.m. for celebrity bagging. In our later agenda, we'll be talking about the proclamation for the Hartford Chabad. I did have a chance to correspond with Rabbi Kushi Schusterman. The rabbi does plan to be here on the 21st. That is a Jewish holiday, but he believes it's one in which he is permitted to travel. But he will confirm with me closer to the date. So we're going to leave it on the agenda in the hopes that he can be here. If he can't, we will once again move it on his behalf. Director Robinson and I spoke earlier today. We still need a confirmation for Mr. Blum for the Christmas parade. If any of the commissioners would like to be the MC at the Shamrock Park after the Christmas parade.
I thought we already confirmed that.
I thought that we had confirmed attendance in the parade, but are you willing
I'd
to?
be happy to
Oh,
do it. I
wonderful.
thought I said I would do whatever Mike Blum wanted me to do,
well,
so
you
within
may have
reason,
said-
within reason.
You may have said that, and I.
That's okay, I just wanted,
okay.
we can handle that right now. I will be happy to do that. Mike just has to tell me where to be and what to do, and I'll be happy to do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's on my calendar, I would not miss it for anything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then Ms. Robertson and I also talked about, along with the other directors, you have the presentation to the Hungarian delegation. If in fact you need our support, please let us know. We'll prepare whatever you need for that meeting.
That's another thing that I believe I already confirmed that I cannot be there, but Commissioner Taylor said he would be there, and the other commissioners, I think I sent it to everybody, anybody that wants to participate. I think their schedule is pretty wide open, as I recall, and they were looking for some information from us. So if everybody can tell me yes or no, they want to, and their availability that day, I will let Carol Kipple know.
Sure. And please just let us know how we can support you. All the
Absolutely.
directors are aware. I got the impression they probably wanted to talk to you about local government, so maybe you won't need us, but if you do. And for now, Madam Chair, that will wrap it up for me.
That was pretty darn short, so thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody have any questions for Eddie about what we gone over? Okay, and I look forward. Go ahead.
Just a question. People ask the Thomas Street, when do we expect it to end? 6 months, 9 months? Ballpark.
Thomas
Street renovation? To conclude, yeah.
I think it's between 6 and 9.
All right,
It
9 months.
varies
6 to 9.
depending on what kind of money we have to see.
Just the people ask.
Yep.
You know.
All right. So next we have the tentative agenda for our town hall meeting on Monday, October 21st, and we will have the presentation to Rabbi Schusterman for the Hartford Haven if he is not precluded from coming due to the fact that it is holiday. And then we have the Economic Development Week proclamation. Angela?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Maryland Economic Development Association, Economic Development Week will emphasize the importance of economic development for the state of Maryland. The week is designed to increase citizens' understanding of economic development's contributions to the state's business climate, job retention and growth, the tax base, and the overall quality of life for Marylanders. Municipalities and counties across the state will recognize projects that make Maryland a great place to live, work, and play. And we ask that the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners provide a proclamation recognizing October 21st through 25th as Economic Development Week in the town of Bel Air.
Great, looking forward to it. All right, anything else on that? All right, under new business on Monday, we will have the long-running Bel Air Police Department patrol vehicle accessory package
There we go.
purchase for like the third time, I think, right?
Yes, ma'am. I think we'll have it ready for you. In fact, what we did is we kind of honed down the price a little bit more, and I think, we don't want to upset the vendor. Eventually, I think he's going to have to stop, but I think we got the price down a couple more thousand. So we initially were going to present $64,000 for the cost. I think we got it down to $62,000 with Lisa's help. So it looks like it's all ready to go for the next meeting, and it's to have the accessory packages installed on 2 marked vehicles and 1 unmarked vehicles, and those patrol vehicle accessory packages will include the radio consoles, radio installs, mobile data computer installs, interior and exterior light bars, sirens, grills, all that stuff that's needed in a police car. So I think we'll be ready to rock and roll with that, and we are well under the line item budgeted amount for that, which was $78,000. We got it down to about $62,000.
That is a huge amount under
Yes,
the.
ma'am.
And you're probably Lisa Moody's favorite person this week then, if you.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yes,
for
ma'am.
$2,000 cost savings, it was worth the wait. And this is, of
Thanks,
course, for
Lisa.
the 3
Yep.
new cars that we've already
Yep.
approved. All right. Any questions for the chief about the accessory packages? Next, we have the sanitary sewer system root control contract. Stephen Klein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is our triannual setup for sewer root control intrusions. We do a third of the town each year, and we rotate that. So this year we're into the Howard Park and Bradford Village neighborhoods, along with the Crocker Street area. The project's going to piggyback on a new organization, which is the Houston, Galveston area of Houston, Texas. We used to piggyback on Baltimore City as well as Baltimore County, but the Houston, Galveston is much larger, and they were able to obtain much better pricing. And over 100 jurisdictions are actually piggybacking on that contract to do root control for the system. The project consists of $37,100. It's to treat about 18,357 linear feet of 8-inch sanitary sewer pipe. One thing that has happened is inflation has finally caught up to the root control process. We had been paying for many, many years $1.69 a linear foot, and it is now going up to $2.02 per linear foot. So that we will have to look at that closely moving forward in the next couple budgets. The budget, we've been budgeting $35,000 for at least 10 years for the root control, so it's going to bump up to close to 40. So we're just going to have to find about $5,000 more annually to do this treatment. We think it's a great treatment. We've reduced the amount of sanitary sewer backups that we've had in our main lines considerably over the years. So we think it's a great program. We're very happy with Duke's Root Control, who has been doing it. We've had very little problems with the community, and I'd like to get your approval to do the annual root control contract.
All
Is there
right.
any questions?
Any questions? I'm sure you're not Lisa Moody's favorite person since you need $5,000 more dollars, but
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but everything is going up.
it's
I will
true.
not be
Mr.
in
Collins.
attendance Monday, but Charlie Dawson will be making this presentation Monday
Okay.
evening.
Great.
So, Mr. Klein, is that a chemical treatment, or is that a physical, like a
It's a
rotor-rooter?
foam chemical that they put down in
Put
the
down.
lines, and they pull it through a hose, and it basically is like shaving cream. It expands into the perimeter of the
Okay.
pipe, and
Right.
what happens is sections of pipes, roots go in between the sections of pipe,
Right.
and they like what they find once they get in there, the water and nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
So they break the clay terracotta pipe up when the roots get larger, and they also get so bad they cause backups. So.
Madam Chair, if I may, Steve, do we still have the video of that?
I'm sure I have it, yeah.
It might be worthwhile to see the video. We took an in-camera video of what it looks like going in. It's also environmentally friendly because a lot of people would
Yeah.
think that we're trying to put in something harmful. It's really not. And the video really isn't much more than watching Drano go down a drain, but it's actually, if you've never seen it, it will give you a perspective for those who may question it. So we'll see if we can find the video and send it to you.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
no further questions, we'll go on to the legal services retainer agreement. Is that Mr. Krantz or Mr. Hoffman?
That's me.
Okay,
Just 1 second, please.
take your time.
So, Madam Chair, I anticipate I will have this ready for Monday night. Ms. Thompson, Ms. Moody, and I have been working on this. As you recall, in May of 2023, when Mr. Keenan passed away, we worked through to secure a retainer with Stark and Keenan. At the time, when we put it through, we found in hindsight, we really never specified a time in writing. However, I do remember a conversation with Ms. Thompson and Ms. Thompson's law firm that we wanted to do the first retainer for a year to get us over the hump of several ongoing civil suits that we had. However, we couldn't find, and Ms. Thompson can correct me if I'm wrong, we could not find where we dated it, but I had marked in my calendar to renew the retainer in September of 2024. So Liz and I and Lisa worked on the retainer for the last month. We were near finishing it, and we found a few other minor things we wanted to correct, which we found over the weekend. So I anticipate having the retainer done for resolution and approval by the commissioners on Monday night. If not, I want to leave it on the agenda just in case. If not, it would be on the following one, and we'll move forward from there. But that's what it's about, ma'am.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions for Eddie about that? No? All right. Staffing update, Mr. Krantz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We currently have 2 jobs posted. We have a laborer position in the Department of Public Works, and we have a police officer position posted for laterals. Someone who may have already experience as a police officer in the state of Maryland would like to come to the town of Bel Air, or we are also accepting applications for recruits. At this point, we have a couple new hires in the pipeline who have recently started in the Public Works Department as well as over in the Finance Department, and things seem to be moving right along.
All right. Any questions for Mike about that? In that case, calendar is up next.
Before we get to the calendar,
Yes, sir.
Mike, have we received an application for the Historic Preservation Committee?
We did receive 1, yes.
Okay. It might be a good idea to look at that because, and it's here in front of me somewhere, but I believe that term of Mr. Lewis has expired, and I can't seem to find it. There it is. It expires in 3 days. So that seat will fall vacant in 3 days. So it might be a good idea for us to review that, maybe get a closed session going on
Absolutely.
that soon. You know, when
Absolutely.
we next are able to do that, just so the seat doesn't sit vacant for too long. I don't think that there's any burning issues in front of HPC right now that desperately need that seat to be filled, but it's always better to fill it sooner rather than later. So just to put that on everyone's radar.
Would you like me to add a closed session to the end of the town hall meeting?
That's what I was going
Yeah,
to
I
suggest.
think that'd be a great idea.
Okay.
Would we need an interview for any of that?
We
We
only
have
have
one
one
applicant.
application.
Okay, well, I'm just curious.
I think we can take that up Monday night.
Talk about it during our closed
Yeah,
session,
okay.
whether we want to do an interview or not.
Gotcha.
And then I know we'll have, we got a couple applications for the Board of Appeals in November, so we can take that up
Take that
later.
up. And what do you think of looking at the applications, discussing those during a closed session as well?
I don't think it would hurt.
I think probably it's a good idea to put a closed session on for both HPC and the Board of Appeals. We can at least take a look at the applications and discuss those in closed session.
Will do.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to miscellaneous, we have discuss ordinance number 815-23, amending the Bel Air Town
Did we talk
Code.
about the calendar?
I'm sorry, I thought we were finished. Well, what other calendar items do we have? Absolutely. There is a calendar. We all got one. We talked about a couple of things, the Hungarian
Yeah.
delegation that's coming. Anybody that is interested, please let me know so I can add you to the list whose schedule needs to be considered. Anything else? I mean, we get the calendar given to us here, so
I know.
I really haven't reviewed it, and I was just concerned about the Hungarian delegation that was coming, so that, I know I can't be there, so that we get schedules coordinated for anyone that's interested. I know you were interested and available, and we'll also include Angela and Eddie and anyone else that they'd like to be interested in talking to, really.
When was Hungarian?
The
Delegation
Hungarian
coming?
delegation is coming to meet with us, and it is October the 26th, I believe.
Okay,
The
it's just not on the
30th.
calendar.
It's October 30th.
I'm sorry, October
October.
30th, thank you.
Okay, which isn't on the calendar, but anyway.
Right, it wouldn't be on the calendar, we just got the email in from, right, on October the 10th, so it's not on our calendar, because it's not really a town function, but we've been asked to
Right.
meet with them, asked if we'd like to, really.
Madam
Uh,
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
also just another calendar question for all of you. I did not send Ruth the individual milestone anniversary recognition items for the calendar. Would you like me to do that so that they are all on an updated calendar for you for next week, since there are 7 of them?
There are 7 of them, and I know on the 22nd, I think it is, there are a couple which I cannot make due to a prior commitment.
Correct.
And I will get around to looking at the rest of them.
Yes.
But it might be a good idea if you just send one email with the 7 dates to all of us, so that we can just concentrate on that and see who's available.
Sure, and I know many of you have already responded to the calendar, the Outlook calendar invites, and I appreciate that, so that I know that we do have commissioner coverage for every event. I just was remiss in sending them to Ruth, and I'm happy to do that if it's helpful for you to see it on your calendar, or I can just send a summary email.
I would just send a summary email, and then everybody can just look at those dates and be sure they've said yes or no, whichever
do.
the answer is.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes,
going
sir.
back to Hungary, who did you want to respond to Ms. Keipel and Andy Harris's office? Was
I
Commissioner-
have responded that I'm
did?
working on it.
Okay.
That I had, and I forwarded it to everybody. What I wanted to see was who is available.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And then I will let her know, and everyone can coordinate their schedules.
Got it, thank you.
Because if it's only Commissioner Taylor, there's only going to be, one person
That may be
that,
because I will not be available on the 30th.
correct.
right.
And I know I wasn't available, so I
Okay.
guess we need to hear from Jim Rutledge, Mary Chance as to availability, and then I will tell Carol who's available. Not available. All right, that leaves it just with Jim Rutledge.
What time is that?
Well, we don't really have a time. They're coming here that day.
I read that email. I'll pull that up. I'll note to make sure we've got.
And then we can let her know who is available and interested in coming, and work the schedules that way.
And that
because
was
we
at
don't-
Congressman Harris's office. I
Correct.
think.
Yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
here.
The Hungarian delegation is coming, and they, like to come visit the town of Blair, and we'd love to have them. All right. Any more calendar items that we're aware of? All right, terrific. Under miscellaneous, we have discussed ordinance number 815-23, amending the Bel Air Town Code, Chapter 37, Elections, Section 37-1, Definitions, and Section 37-6, General Elections, subsection C, filing of certificate of candidacy, and adding Section 37-26, Campaign Finance Reporting, and Section 37-27, Limitation and Use of Campaign Contributions. This is a piece of legislation that I believe we passed in 2023, hence the 815-23. It was something that was brought up by the last board. The town has, and it's really campaign finance. So prior to this being passed, and it doesn't take effect until January the 1st, 2025, the town had no campaign finance reporting requirements. Aberdeen does, Havre de Grace does. There had been a bill in the state legislature, and it's been there more than one time, that would mandate that all the municipalities have campaign finance reporting requirements, but it has never passed. I think one of the commissioners from the old board thought that it had passed, and it was then, very important that we get this done. I don't think it ever got out of committee. MML has been opposed to it, I think, every time it's appeared in the state legislature. And one of the reasons is, and I would have, unfortunately, I have a little packet of information that I would have shared if time had allowed this week. But I had looked up MML's opposition. And their opposition was basically, many jurisdictions are required by ethics laws to have elected officials and certain employees file financial disclosures. So they have to already identify things that would be required on the financial disclosure for campaign finance. You would have to disclose already any money that, you know, you got as a contribution, so to speak, from anybody that did business with the town, any vendors that we had, anybody that, you know, you thought was going to be coming before the town for anything. So a lot of it was already covered. It didn't cover things like my neighbor who likes me and decided to give me $50 for my campaign, something like that. The concern that I had, and I did vote against this, was that it, and this is what the MML said too, the league is concerned that forcing all municipalities to create and administer a campaign finance system would be an administrative burden on small towns. And more importantly, it could further deter qualified candidates for running for public office. Many small towns already have a hard enough time recruiting officials to fill their councils, boards, or commissions in today's political climate. One of the first things I asked before I filed to run for this job was, do I have to do all that campaign finance stuff? Because at the state level, you have to have a campaign manager and a treasurer. So I'm not just going to burden myself, I have to burden somebody else. And for such a position that it's like the very lowest level of government, it's a very small campaign, I self-funded it, and I intend to self-fund a second time. I just think we are going to dissuade people who are just folks. I'm an attorney. I can figure out how to do it. I don't really want to be bothered with it, but if I have to, you know, I can figure it out. But for just folks, it's really a burden to put on them. And in some campaigns in the town, it's not really even an election because you don't have more candidates running than there are seats available, as I noticed in years gone past. So that was my feeling about it. If MLL is opposed, if the state legislature hasn't forced it, I don't want to put that burden on folks. There's an email exchange that was between Commissioner Hughes and Sean Campbell, where he expressed the same feeling, and I will share that with you. Commissioner Hughes's justification, or reason that she thought this was necessary, was that in the November 2019 town election, the Harford County Republican Central Committee sent some targeted mailers to town residents. They can do that. They can do that whether we have campaign finance laws or not. She felt there was sort of somebody outside interfering with the town election. I just see it as like everybody gets to have their say. You can't tell them they can't participate and try to, you know, affect the outset of an election. The other thing that she said was that there were rumors in the 2020 electoral cycle that insinuated there was some financial backing or campaign funding from a candidate for higher county office that was given to a town commissioner in the 2021 election. You are never going to stamp out rumors on social media with campaign finance reporting. There is campaign finance reporting at the state and federal level, and I see plenty of things on social media accusing everybody of, you know, being on the take and lining their pockets. You just can't stamp that kind of thing out. I think what we have for our ethics reporting is sufficient to cover anything that we need, and everybody has to do that, whether they're a commissioner or, you know, department heads. It's not terribly onerous, but to have to, you know, create a campaign committee, and, you know, I'm not even sure if it needs a separate bank account. Does it need a separate tax ID number? You know, how do you go about doing this? I just don't think that we've shown a real need for that. And the other problem is, you know, the state has a pretty well fleshed out system with their forms. They have a whole book about how you do things. We've adopted a much tinier thing, which is good and bad. I mean, it's much smaller, so you think it's less complicated, but it leaves a lot of things unanswered that are answered at the state level. So to me, it's either do it the whole way or just don't bother with it and just continue with the ethics form. So I had voted against it. And I thought it was a good time to discuss it since we have another election coming up in 2025. I'm going to self-fund, so I almost think I don't care that much about it, but it really bothers me that we're setting up hurdles to the folks that just live here in town, who aren't attorneys, who haven't been government employees before, and we're going to have them jump through this hurdle. So I'm interested in hearing everyone else's thoughts.
Madam Chair, I mean, I kind of agree with you on many of those points. I think this is, I don't think you're going to be bought for $2,000 or $3,000, which is what it costs to run a campaign here with signs and stuff. It is an extra burden to put on. It could discourage viable candidates because they don't know the rules and all. And there's a lot to get up to speed on when you are running, let alone with having to deal with the financial side of it. I really don't think it's necessary at this level for as large, for as small as our campaigns are.
I'm going to jump in here and say that when I ran, I deliberately opened a separate checking account so that if I had friends or family who wanted to give me some money to help support my campaign, which I am not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, and felt like if someone wanted to help me with that, I was grateful for that. So set up a separate checking account that was managed by a separate individual, not myself. And then when the campaign was over and I had a few $100s left over, I ended up clearing that checking account out and making a donation to a nonprofit. So I just, simple, easy, but easy for anyone who had any questions to look at what I was taking in or how I was spending it or what I was going to do with it in the end was very clean cut. That, for me, was the way to go.
But you didn't actually file any report with anyone. I mean, there's no public document we can look at.
No. But I highly recommend that it, if you're not self-funding it, that if you do receive some funding from an individual who wants to help you with your campaign, that be done that way. No, there wasn't any other filing.
And ours does actually require a report, even if you are self-funding.
Excuse me?
Our campaign finance law that's on the books currently
Currently,
requires a report, even if you are totally self-funding.
true.
And what's the point of that?
Yeah.
I tend to think that, I personally have a campaign account open with the state of Maryland, so anyone can look at anyone who's given me money and what I've spent money on, and I think that that's completely fine, and I chose to do it that way, exactly as Mary said, just because it's for me, that was the easiest way to do it. And cleaner. But I also agree that was me choosing to take an extra step, and that it might not be a bad idea to reduce this barrier of confusion for individuals, because for a job that pays $4,800 a year, this is truly a volunteer position, and in a town of 11,000 people, not even. We ought to have citizen government. That's what the commission form of government does best, is just 5 neighbors who have been entrusted by their neighbors to make decisions on behalf of their community. We have a mayor, but you don't have any more power than we do. It is sort of the most even level of government, and we have a professional staff to keep an eye on us if anything goes wrong. And so it is balanced in that way. So I'm not averse to removing the barrier. Again, for me personally, the easiest way was to go through the state, but I am worried about this middle option where we sort of have these requirements that there aren't years of precedents and manuals and explanations and guides for. That there may be questions, that there may be discrepancies in how people file, and there's also no enforcement mechanism here. You know, at the state level, it's very clear what happens to you if you fail to meet the responsibilities of holding open a campaign finance account. At the town level, we don't quite possess the might of the state of Maryland, nor should we possess the might of the, State Board of Elections. Because again, this is a very different trust than some of those state and county offices. So that's where I come down on it. I am weary of halfway solutions like this. I tend to think you should go all or none. For me, personally, the best solution was all. But I can't sit here and say that that would be necessarily good for democracy. In fact, I think it might have a chilling effect on having people run. And I don't think that that's a responsible use of our trust either. We shouldn't be sitting up here and closing the door behind us by any means necessary. So you've brought up some good points today. This is certainly something that I'm going to have to mull over and think about more. But those are my initial reactions.
So, Madam Chair, I'm sympathetic to Commissioner Taylor's analysis. When I have thought about this in the past, and I've been through the campaign finance federally, state, and this law, one of the hardest things to do is really to track those expenditures. And then the other thing is to deal with just simple, friendly cash offers of $20, and people come to an event and they might have $10 or $20 in cash they want to give, and then how do you track that? Do you allow cash? Does it have to be checks? The expenditures. Well, I used my credit card because I had the best deal with dirt cheap signs that day. Thought it was going to go another route, but I don't have a debit card associated with my separate checking account. What do I do? Can I reimburse myself? Is somebody going to accuse me of a reimbursement to my own credit card as me paying myself out of campaign finances? Is that prohibited? The list of horrors goes on, which is why when we get into mandatory expenditure reporting and reimbursements for expenditures, and then what is really a direct or an indirect support expenditure by an outside organization? The federal courts are full of that and continue to be. I just don't want to get into it. I like it either no rule or we follow the state rule. And the state rule is burdensome, but it's legal. They've vetted everything against First Amendment prohibitions. The idea of an arbitrary prohibition at $1,000 contribution smacks is a First Amendment violation to me. I just do not like the current law at all because it's a half measure. I think it's a bad measure, and so I'm an all or nothing person. And so because we are a small town, I would favor just repealing it in toto, which in Latin means in its entirety. So
I would just like to briefly jump in and say, Jim, that's a point that I hadn't considered. I agree the discordance between the town and the state on the $1,000 versus the state's $6,000 limitation might be a little bit of an issue. And so that is definitely something worthwhile to look at.
It also bothered me, but I was kind of figured, like, who's going to give more than $1,000 to you for a town campaign, and, why do you need that much? But it could happen. I mean, you could have a relative that wanted to give you $2,000, your rich aunt or something, and they wouldn't be able to, and, what's the purpose of that? So,
well, I thought of the next Jake Taylor. I mean, what if mom says, you know what, I've had this money set aside for college. I think maybe the best thing you could ever do is run for town commission at the age of 20. Let's see if we can get one running at 18. They probably need the $2,000, and I know we think it's cheap, etc. But mailers. I mean, this day and age, there is a risk knocking on doors. You take a risk, and we, not just the dog coming through the door at you, but just people. I had a few encounters last year were the hostility of people is just, I think it's going hand in hand with people and road rage. Just people just seem angry on the edge. And so would a candidate always want to do the old-fashioned pavement, knock door to door with a relatively cheap door hanger? Or will they have to resort to direct mail? Hey, that's big money. For the vote, the
I did
number of
find
votes.
that out myself,
Just do,
yeah.
do the math on that with our registered voters, and do the math if you want to do 3 mailers. That's a lot more than $1,000 bucks. That's a lot more than it just costs $2,000 or
It is for sure.
$3,000. I just think that it's and who knows what's going to happen when the General Assembly gets a hold of how much help we're going to get from the Board of Elections. Maybe it'll all get wrapped up into one thing or another. I think for now I'd like just to go back to square zero.
All right. Well, I think we'll let that all gel a little bit and then come back to it, Mr. Krantz.
If I may, it would, in my humble opinion, I think it would require an ordinance to repeal this ordinance, so you'd still have to go through the
Absolutely.
the public hearing process.
Absolutely. This is just our discussion about
Right.
whether we want to let it stand or take action to repeal it
And
before
s-
we get into the next election cycle.
Understood. And I was just going to bring up the January 1st really isn't that far away. We only have so many meetings. And it probably, if it is your intent to repeal, we probably should introduce something soon, so.
And that is why it is on the work
Okay.
session tonight.
All right.
But you're right, the first is very, very close indeed. All right, anything further on the campaign finance? All right, next we have discuss Harford County Bill number 24-033, read the school impact fees. I know I sent to everybody the study that was done by the county as well as the legislation that has been introduced. It looks to me like similar to our fee in lieu of green space, that the numbers are very old for the impact fee for schools. They did a study. They are going to have public hearings, take input from everybody on raising the school impact fees. Steve and I met with Tony G. from District C and Pat Vincente. They are looking for they're looking for our input on the impact fees from all the municipalities. They were going to contact Havre de Grace as well as Aberdeen, but that's what the discussion is here this evening, to see how everyone feels about the increase in the impact fees for schools.
Just to add to that setup, I was at the Harford TV ceremony today and met and saw Pat Vincente and Tony G. And they had already talked with Aberdeen and Havre de Grace, and were in the process of going through and talking to several of the developers in the community. So they're pulling together all kinds of input, and hopefully I think it's early November is the meeting.
I think
They're
it
having a hearing
is,
open.
I was going to say November 5th, but I think that's Election Day, so it may not be. But it'll certainly be on their website that they are going to have a public hearing.
Have their public hearing.
November 5th, okay, there you go.
Okay.
So the public hearing is November 5th, so they need our input before that time. Steve and I told them the usual thing, we're only 2:05, so take a look at that study and the proposed legislation, and it may be amended after they take input from all parties and have their public hearings. But I think they're headed in the right direction. I think the numbers were ridiculously low, particularly the impact fees for apartments. They're producing way more students for the public school system than I would have ever guessed. So they're not paying their way as far as the impact fees for the schools, and
Right.
we'll see what happens with that piece of legislation. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, just a question. Ms. Moody and I talked about this, and on the heels of our meeting with the council president, I didn't see where any of these impact fees come to the municipalities.
Nope.
And I'm curious, is there legislation that prevents that when the same infrastructure impacts us, fire, police, other critical infrastructure services? that those fees could support. Could that be a potential, with your permission, could that be part of the discussion?
I will talk to the county about that, but my understanding is these are for school, this is money designated for schools only. Only. So we can't have part of this money, we don't fund the schools. What they were asking us for input was because it could impact development in the town, because anybody that's gonna
Right.
develop in the town has to pay this school impact fee. But no, we don't get any part of this and
Okay.
cannot.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure it was the right path. Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, I'll wade in. I'm completely against the impact fee increase. We have a housing shortage.
We do.
There was an article just in the Wall Street Journal just a couple of days ago about the burdens that are being heaped on to be able to build and meet that. The impact fee economically affects three players. One is the landowner, two is the developer, and the third is the home buyer. And with increasing pressures, read another article both on the Wall Street Journal and also I think it was in The Economist over the weekend, that was talking about the fact that there is a lot of talk. Are we in a housing bubble or are we not? The consensus of economists saying we are not, that the housing prices will continue to increase because we have such a pent-up, unsatisfied demand. The supply can't keep up with it. And the increase, the decrease on the Fed fund rate was already pretty much baked into the cake on mortgage rates coming down. So they come down a little bit, but they think that ride down is done, and we're still not seeing a lot of increase in the volume of houses on the market. People are hurting, and I can't support anything that would contribute to the inflation of housing prices. Can't do it, won't do it, I think is wrong-headed. And the whole idea of this impact fee, just, if we need more money for schools, my view is go ahead and say, hey, folks, across the county, all of your taxes are going up, whether you're an independent, a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, across the board, and not just the people that want to move into Harford County for the first time and make Harford County their home. We, I believe, from a public policy standpoint, to have good economic development, need baseline two things. Continue to support our law enforcement and have robust safety things. The idea that we just heard from Judge Mahoney, why that drug court, which is having such a great impact against recidivism, doesn't get more money, blows my mind. But no, what the county executive is proposing is a $10,000 per unit per house impact fee. That's a huge increase, and I don't buy the argument that, well, the prices need to go up because we're behind the times. No, we cannot and should not support increasing housing prices on a single citizen in this county, in this town, over the impact fee argument. I think it's a backdoor way to try to shut down development, and I think it is pig-headed and wrong-headed, and I'm totally against it for those reasons.
Thank you for that input. Anyone else? And we don't need to make any decisions tonight, it's more of a
Right.
discussion. And
Right. No, I'm a firm believer in increasing the impact fees. I think if you have an impact on the community, that you must pay your way. You have to be part of the solution to mitigate the impact. And this is one way of doing it. It is increasing student enrollment when you build in the community. The current residents have already paid their impact fees to handle the schools that were built years ago. And new residents are going to have to pay, or if that's the way it goes, when you would build a home, you're going to have to pay your way for our students, for our children. And that's what it's about. It is not about that money being used for anything else. It's about educating our children, keeping them in an environment that's educational friendly, that they have the correct student to teacher ratios, they have the facilities. You know, I first met with the Board of Education, Harford County Public Schools, when I first became a commissioner, and they were talking about how they have older schools that aren't built to today's standards. They don't have the rooms they need for all the special programs, which the state has mandated without funding. So how are we going to upgrade those schools to give them those facilities? And this is one way of doing it. It's not going to solve the problem, but it helps do that. And, you know, right now, when you look at the impact fees, there's about a 10% difference between what an apartment, by the school system, by what an apartment generates in terms of students per school, and what a single-family home generates in students per school. Right now, the impact fee is $6,000 for a single-family home, and it's 1/5 of that, $1,200 for an apartment. But there's only a 10% difference in the impact on student enrollment. So clearly they're out of balance, clearly. So they need to be readjusted with the times. They haven't been changed in, I think, over 10 years, if not longer. So it should escalate with the cost of schools. You know, I believe when we talked to Harford County Public Schools, they were saying to put a portable in, I believe it was $380,000 to put a portable classroom at a school. That's not a permanent thing, that's a temporary trailer. It was $380,000. So who's going to pay that bill? It's those that are having to increase, it's the projects and the people that are having the impact on the schools, and I think it's totally warranted. I think we need to do this, and we should support it.
Anything from Commissioners Taylor and Chance? Or would you like more time to think about it? I'm going to hold my opinion for now. Okay. It's a big topic for sure. All right. In that case, I think we're ready to move on.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I
yes,
could.
sir.
Yeah, I'm just, we're suffering inflation. Prices haven't gone down, and I'm against increasing inflation. It's inflationary policy. No matter how much you care about, it's always about, you know, well, this money's going to help somebody, this money's going to help somebody. How about helping the person who busted their butt to bring home a paycheck and realize their check just shrank because inflation is a thief and this is an inflationary policy? And I'll conclude with that.
Okay. There's no further comments on this topic. We're going to move on to the next one, which is discuss the Maryland Housing Expansion and Affordability Act of 2024. This was, of course, a bill passed by the state, and it did a couple of things as far as we are concerned. Some of them really aren't an issue for us. The enrolled bill is now available. I will email it to everybody probably tomorrow. The purpose was, of course, to expand housing choices and make them more affordable in the entire state. So one thing that it did was change what can be allowed in single-family zoned areas. So under our zoning provisions, you can put single-family homes, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Small, to make sure I have this right, in any of our zoning districts except heavy industrial?
I believe it's any of our zoning districts except for M1. Yeah.
M1. So you can put single-family homes in any of those districts. So now that the state has passed this law, in any of those districts except M1, you must permit all the types of housing that they have, cottage housing, modular homes, manufactured homes, a number of things.
Right.
So we should probably consider whether we want to permit all those types of housing in all the areas that it can now be placed.
Right. my read is that we're not gonna have a choice.
If we
That-
allow single-family housing in those areas.
Yes, but, you know, in zones, well, the way I would look at it is if you're in B2, what do you care if you, I mean, most of those, since we're a graduated
Right.
Zoning,
Our sort of
most of the more
stacks.
intense zones allow for all of those types of projects. One of the things that I think what we're gonna end up having to do is to include the definitions of all of these different, well, right, we have a duplex, but I don't know if it's the same as what the state calls a duplex. Triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, which are basically mini homes.
Right, you have to have 4 of them, no greater than 900 square feet, and a minimum of 4,
Right,
and some kind of a courtyard. And I'm not
on,
sure if
on a
it's-
courtyard,
And
yeah.
I'm not sure if it gave anything about like on a half an acre or like what.
And yeah, it doesn't talk about that. Now, that's something that, you know, my interpretation is that it would leave it up to us to decide how that works. What's the separation between the two
Right,
units, things
'cause
like that.
Squeezing 4 of them on like a quarter acre lot is probably not gonna work.
I look at this as making this the college park of, you know, making every suburb a college park. Because you look at College Park or any university town, single-family houses or single-family lots are converted to either apartments, townhouses, or some kind of a quad type of unit, because they're trying to jam in as much density as possible. And it ends up really basically destroying the neighborhood, because you're now taking owners, you're getting rid of them, and you're putting in renters. Now, I'm not saying that all renters are bad, I'm saying that they're transient, and that does not create for a stable neighborhood.
Actually, I had asked Secretary Day what kind of housing he was trying to encourage with this, because it seems to me that it encourages rental housing, and he said he didn't care. That was not part of his, thought process, like any housing was good housing. But I think it's going to encourage rental housing, and you do change a community that way because people are transient.
You basically destabilize that
And
neighborhood.
we are already, we're like 60% owner occupied and 40% rental according to the census statistics, because I know we don't have a rental registry, we don't really track that kind of thing. All right. So the other thing it did was it talked about qualified projects, and they were going to get certain extra benefits under the state law, which now we would have to abide by as well. One of which is projects located within 3/4 of a mile of a passenger rail station. We don't have any of that.
No.
Aberdeen does, so that, and they have some projects going on actually near the rail station. The one that is, a couple that are concerning is the project is located on a historic former state or federal-owned campus.
My look at that is that it has to be multiple
It has
buildings.
to be multiple buildings, yeah.
So I'm not sure that,
Is
I
going
know
to
of no
be-
state or federal property that has multiple buildings in the town.
Okay, is that your
Unless you
reading
can-
too, Liz?
Yes,
That'd be great, because then I don't think we have any
yeah, because
around here.
at first, obviously, our first concern was Mary Risto.
Exactly.
But that, we went back over it again today in preparation for the work session, and it's only one building. So, you don't have that issue, unless
Right.
they amend it. I mean, that's always possible.
Correct, coming to a legislative session near you is in the
Yeah.
future. And the last one was, the project is controlled by a nonprofit or located on land owned by a nonprofit. I really thought the state made a terrible mistake here, because like, nonprofit doesn't, I always think of like Habitat for Humanity, a great organization that's very helpful, but you don't have to, nonprofit doesn't mean you're not making money and paying your CEO like $1 million a year.
Correct. If you're
Um,
okay, I'll kind of step
yeah,
in.
go ahead.
Okay. So I did a little bit of research on this one. This one is the one that I think the Board of Town Commissioners is probably going to be most concerned about. There's 2 facets of the law that I thought to point out to you tonight at the work session, which Kevin and Eddie asked me to come. Number one, the nonprofit has, the only criteria is that it has to have been a nonprofit for 3 years. There are actually nonprofits out there that partner with for-profit developers in the development of residential and sometimes affordable housing projects. Not that there's anything wrong with that. the other part of this is that the way I'm reading the law is that there is no, for lack of a better word, vesting in the process that the nonprofit has to go into. What I mean by that is that this is a criteria that under our code gets them through the planning commission. So that nonprofit could be a part of this business venture through the planning commission, satisfy the check the box, get their approvals, and walk off the project and leave it for the for-profit developer. So there's really, unfortunately, no way around this because obviously it is a state law. One thing that Kevin and I had sort of talked about before is just brainstorming because there are going to be provisions of this section of the state law that is going to have to be codified into the town code, is that we could add as a performance standard, you know, I know that the Board of Town Commissioners was very concerned, and Kevin was very concerned about the disruption of long established neighborhoods in the town of Bel Air. And one criteria that I don't see as a problem is that the developer who is suggesting, let's say Howard Park. Let's take Howard Park, for example, okay? Very long-standing old community in the town of Bel Air, one of the first subdivisions. And we could require the developer to do something like produce a title report by a licensed title producer within the last 60 days and to disclose to the town, specifically him and the planning commission, any and all declarations, covenants, and restrictions that may be on the property and show to the planning commission how they intend to comply with those declarations. For the late folks on the dais, what properties have are declarations. So this is your typical, you have an HOA, they have a declaration. You can't have, you know, chickens in the backyard, it's only single family, you pay your dues, you know, you mow your grass, that kind of stuff. Howard Park is a very old subdivision, so they don't have an HOA, but they do have declarations that were put in a deed a long, long, long time ago. And I want to say it was in the early 50s. So the problem is that your standard title report only goes back 60 years. So if it's Howard Park, they're not going to find it. Now, if we get something, I'm going to say to Kevin, where's the declarations? And they're going to say, there are no declarations, Liz. I know there's declarations because I found them. So you can find them too. So that could be something that I don't think is in violation of state law because this law does not speak to declarations. It does not say this will abrogate any declarations that are currently recorded against the properties. So that is a private agreement that is a restriction of when that person took title. So if Howard Park says, and I know it says it, there's only allowed one single family dwelling on each lot in Howard Park. So a lot of what this does with like the cluster homes and stuff like that would never happen because that declaration would stop that type of development because the land doesn't permit it under Maryland law. So we were kind of brainstorming that kind of thing. But the nonprofit thing is also, again, something I'm not sure that you guys have really control over, but I just wanted to make you aware of it. And obviously you can put in the code, and I think in another section we have something with nonprofits where they have to produce.
That, yeah, it's for group homes.
Yeah, for group homes, because they can only be run by group homes. So the same kind of restrictions, or really it's an informational.
And that's something we found in the state law.
Correct, that we could do that. So I just wanted to point those issues out. If you guys have any questions, of course, I'm totally willing to answer anything.
So with a declaration, it can't be changed?
Can a declaration be changed?
In a deed, yeah.
It cannot be changed unless it is on its face. So lots of times what it'll say is that the 1950 ones I'm giving you an example of, that can't be changed because there was no mechanism to change it. It goes by its document, it's a contract thing. But in your more recent subdivisions, there's usually built in an amendment provision that says, you know, if you get 2/3 of the homeowners together, Major Choice might have something like that. Where you can,
and there's also a state law for those entities that have a really high percentage. There's state law that says a lower percentage is acceptable, and I forget the numbers right now, but you're right.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, but it depends on what the document says, Steve.
Right, okay.
Does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
There were attempts to close the nonprofit loophole by pointing it out, that for one reason or another we're unsuccessful. And so I think that everybody who has seen this coming down the pike has been gravely concerned about the situations that you've outlined, that there really aren't nearly enough guardrails. And I do think that it's a deeply unfortunate thing because we're relying on the goodwill surrounding the concept of a nonprofit, which, you know, countless nonprofits do wonderful work. You couldn't imagine how different a world we would live in if all of the nonprofits that exist ceased to exist. It would be significantly worse. But then you're empowering individuals to use the aegis of the nonprofit as a shield and sort of like a turtle just, you know, creep under without proper supervision. And that is concerning. That is very concerning. And as you say, Ms. Thompson, there's really not much that we can do about it other than, you know, be as vigilant as possible and continue to think about this very seriously.
In addition, one other thing just I'll add is, or there's a couple of things. One is that what they're looking at is unreasonable limitations that the locality may attempt to throw out. Those are related to height, setback, bulk, parking, and this is one that I think Liz and I were kind of talking about. You know, the unreasonable limitation to the viability of an affordable housing. How do you define that?
Yeah, that
Well,
could be interest rates.
Their statement was that we'll let the courts work that out.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what a nightmare. Expense
Yeah.
and uncertainty for all parties. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just, it was terribly, I think, drafted and poorly thought out, but
And
here it
I
is.
mean, I have no personal knowledge, I don't think Kevin has, of any projects upcoming, but I think this is going to be one of those things where you're going to need a test case. You're going to need a case that, and I hope it's not us, I hope it's not the county.
I hope it's not us too.
Exactly. But something's going to come down the pike, and someone's going to come in, and they're going to say, I complied with the law, and the municipality or the county is going to say, no, you didn't, and we're not approving this. And they're going to say, okay, I got you. Because the purpose of this bill is to increase affordable housing. You know, it's to increase the density, which again, you know, kind of begs the question on which way are we going here, right? So, and it's, you're tagging in theories of affordable housing, discriminatory practices, Fair Housing Act, all of those things kind of come along with it, you know, with the affordable housing munker, if you will.
But I think there's also, I mean, the other two tests are the degree of affordability of affordable housing.
Yeah.
I can't quite wrap my head around that. And the last one is the one that I think when we start to talk about mixed use and what issues we're going to be running into, the allowable density or number of units of a qualified project. We're going to need to be careful on how we proceed. One last thing, and it was because it came up when we were talking about mixed use. Let's see. Yeah, the way I read this, and Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, of the three ways that mixed use can be kind of brought into this affordable housing allowance, which is a 30% bump on your density, is that if you're a multifamily residential use, you can get the bump from a 30% bump. That if you're a non-residential use, and which may consist of a mixed use, the density limits do not exceed the highest allowable, because you're, I guess, in a not, I would assume the way they're referring to this is if you're in a non-residential zoning that allows
Yeah, like a
mixed use.
B3A.
Yeah.
That's how I read it.
Yeah. So that, and then the last one is for mixed use may include, and this is for, in an area zoned for mixed use, which we really don't have mixed use zoning. So this may or may not apply to us, but it would include 30% or more housing units that are allowed in a zone that are not part of a qualified project. So you don't even have to be qualified. You can just say, I'm mixed use. But the way I'm looking at this, and this is something we're gonna have to examine even harder, is that, what does that mean? You know, if you're in a mixed-use zone, well, we don't have any mixed-use zones. We do have, mixed-use designations in our comprehensive plan. So it's just, anyway, the way this thing reads is
It's not the
confusing.
best.
What about our overlay district?
Overlay district, that you could, some people might interpret that as being mixed use because you're taking a residential zone and you're allowing commercial uses in it, provided they have the right approvals.
I just wanted to come back to Liz, your point about the declarations. Were you suggesting there's anything that the town could do to have a record of those that would make them more easily identifiable or not? Or what was the point about that as far as, point well taken.
Sure.
I mean, I get the point about that these are there.
Yeah.
But I also get the point, like, they might not be readily found.
Correct. I mean, Kevin and I sort of threw out the idea of maybe, creating like a registry, but I think that would take a lot of manpower and, time attorney-wise, or even Greg Carson doing his digging from, I can go back to some of our old subdivision files at the office, because we've been doing this forever, and see if I could, pull out the neighborhoods like Howard Park. That's how I found Howard Park. And see if I can find it and provide it to the planning department. But I felt that it might be a more economically feasible way, just as an idea, to put the onus on the developer. You have to produce this. You have to show us that there are no declarations. And if there are, then your plan is consistent with those declarations. And I'm kind of like tit-tatting a little bit of a line, because Kevin and I have talked about this before. The one thing that I don't think that the director of planning should be doing is enforcing private covenants. That is not his job. But at the same time, those covenants are of record. They're legally binding. And I think it's not unfair to say you have to show the planning department developer and the planning commission that you can comply with these declarations.
Yeah, I
Does
think
it
we
make
got
sense?
some economic interest to defend there, because I could picture a day where the permits are issued, it even went through planning
Yeah.
commission, et cetera, and permits are issued, and then the residents
Correct.
sue for an injunction to
Mhm.
stop it, and we're gonna be a party to that case.
Exactly, yeah. So in Howard Park, one of the mechanisms, and Jim kind of pointed it out, is, and it says it in the document, is it's basically, now it does have a reference, but I think it has an old office reference. It wasn't director of planning, it was some other office of the town that doesn't exist anymore. But it was like basically like the residents of Howard Park could get together and they could file a lawsuit. Or this former director of the town, I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't planning. It was some other terminology, could enforce the declarations as well. But I didn't want Kevin to go down that road. That's not, but again, to your point, yes, correct. We could get dragged into it.
Yeah, so I guess we could evaluate some type of reference to, I don't know whether it would be the planning commission or the director of planning, Kevin, I'm not sure, that would ask for a certification.
Yeah, it would be something to the effect of when they submit their application, they would have to have some sort of affidavit or a title report saying that there's no declarations, covenants, or restrictions on the property or if there are, here they are, you provide them to Kevin and the planning commission, and you have to show that you can comply with these declarations.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously it would be a shoe-in, because Kevin would take a look at it and say, oh, the declarations say you can have a single family. Oh, you're trying to do a cluster home on this little lot in Howard Park. That's not going to work,
And that was, I know, as we discussed before, Liz, one of my concerns was the Howard Park neighborhood, because I was going to say
Yeah.
affordable, but, I'm not sure any real estate right now is affordable.
Yeah,
But
right.
it's one of our more affordable neighborhoods. It's a solid neighborhood. It's been there for decades. We've got people living there who've lived there, 50 years.
Yes.
It would be a terrible thing to have that neighborhood have something like this happen.
Yes, and so they do have, I know lots of people say, oh, I don't like HOAs, I don't like declarations. Yeah, sometimes they're helpful, so.
All right. Right.
Yeah,
And the-
excellent point, Liz, really.
And
Kevin,
the
thank
other
you.
thing that I had been concerned about was to make sure that we have some density bonuses in our code. Those density bonuses would be, the state density bonuses would be stacked on top of any
Stacked
bonuses
on
that
top.
we have.
Yes.
So do we have any that are similar to the states that we have a stacking issue?
I need to go back and
Look at
do a little
that.
bit more research.
Yeah. Because what I
my-
don't want to have is something where we would have given a density bonus, the state gives a density bonus, and now we have something that we didn't mean to permit in the town.
And one of the things I think we're going to do, and I'm adding this to the agenda, I'm meeting with my counterparts from Aberdeen and Havre de Grace in early November, is we're going to look at what their densities are, how they, what are their limitations to, especially, again, I keep going back to mixed use because you can do that without being a qualified project, and that's concerning. But how does that going to happen, and where do we fall within that realm? Because we want to be in the middle. We want to be the average.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything? All right. Well, this is only the start of the discussion. It's a big hairball to wrestle with, and I am very disappointed that the legislature said, and the courts, you can figure it out there.
I was curious, Jake, if there had been if you had heard anything when this was kind of going on down about the declarations, because I'll be honest with you, I was pretty surprised that the end result did not say anything about it.
It was not brought up once, and I think I won't speculate as to why that was, but it may have something to do with the fact that the people in favor didn't think of it, and the people against didn't want them to think of it. So
Gotcha.
It might have
They
been.
just kind of looked at each other,
It
right?
might have been one of those questions better off not asked.
Okay.
But that is pure speculation, and but no, of the record, watching everything, watching committee hearings in both the House and the Senate, and just keeping an eye on everything, it was not, to my recollection, ever brought up once in witness testimony, in debate, either at the committee or floor level. I really struggle to recall that, and to your point, maybe that is due to some august and arcane respect for declarations, or maybe it is the arcanity of declarations. Everyone just kind of forgot about them. It could go either way. So we will certainly see how, as these issues actually materialize and become real, and as the pavement or as the construction pavement or construction rubber meets the legal pavement. That's what I'm trying to say. How those things will be adjudicated.
Yeah, I mean, the case law has not changed in a million years concerning declarations. Of course, obviously, for the only parts that are not enforceable are your standard, subdivisions that have covenants against Catholics and African Americans and that kind of stuff. That's over like Fulford Avenue, that subdivision down there. That I know because we were doing research one time and I found their covenants and they have those restrictive covenants, and obviously those are no longer enforceable. But everything else is, and the courts are like, this is a contract. This has been there. The owner way back when had a right to restrict the property. There's nothing that is discriminatory effect. It is what it is. It's been that way forever. So just find another property. So that one is, I would be interested to see what that dynamic is with something like this. You know what I mean? But I was just curious about that.
Yeah, they do pick and choose, like solar panels. They
Yeah.
pass a specific law saying, forget the covenants, forget the declarations, green light, solar panels.
Same thing with the satellite dishes from
Yeah.
way back when.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And clotheslines.
Yeah.
And a few other things like flags, election
Anything having to do with
signs.
constitutional issues,
Amendment,
yeah.
yep.
Or if it's abrogated by like FHA, I think that's how you get the satellites and the solar panels.
That is the satellites and the
Yes.
that's the satellite dishes. If you want to
Yeah.
have that on your house, yes.
Yeah. So.
One of the things that Eddie Hopkins and I, when we attended the Affordable Housing Symposium a couple months ago, which really wasn't helpful on the affordable housing legislation, but they had a committee report out on the accessory dwelling unit report and what they were going to send to the legislature. So nothing has been put in law. It's just the report from the committee. But one of those recommendations was that accessory dwelling units cannot be prohibited by HOA documents, which is kind of funny. So they thought about it there, but they didn't think about it in other
I think they
facets.
didn't think about it, and of course, there's always the next legislative session. But there's old declarations, I think people have kind of forgotten about them. And I think they're not thinking about HOA documents, which is odd, really.
And it's unfortunately, when people are doing title, this is a little bit off topic, but title companies do not have to be licensed Maryland attorneys. They just have to be licensed through the state. It can be anyone, as long as they have the CLEs, and that's it. But what they don't understand is that when they're doing titles, if I'm pulling a deed today, probably if I pulled not 10 deeds in Howard Park, I guarantee you none of them probably say anything about the declarations that are there at all. It just,
But you know,
but I know because I found them.
because you've been doing this a really long time.
Yeah.
All right, anything more on the Housing Expansion and Affordability Act? All right, heading to our last heavy topic for this evening, the Bel Air Town Code, Chapter 165, Comprehensive Plan and Development Regulations regarding mixed use. I'm going to leave that to Commissioner
Yes.
Chismar.
Yeah, I'll start with that, and Kevin, chime in anytime. You know, I was looking over the mixed-use regulations governing that, and you know, it seems like there's a lot of things that are not well-defined, that may be somewhat ambiguous. You know, and we have to take a look at what our vision of the town is. You know, we have business zones, which I don't think were really meant to be 100% residential, but the code does not really specify what's the allowable mix between business and residential. I don't think we want to turn, you know, Main Street and construct buildings on Main Street that are all residential. So we you know, there's some issues there with that, and I think we need to look at those per zone. You know, how much should be in B3 versus B3A versus B2, B2A, and the like. And also, you know, not all the zones have a residential density specified. B1 and B3 have specified dwelling densities for the different kinds of residents, but B2, B2A, and B3 do not. And this also comes into a question: is should we even have density specified in the mixed area? Some other things looked at was how should dwelling unit density be computed when residential units are only part of the property? You know, just take for instance the mall. B3 has, I think it's a 20 dwelling unit per acre. The mall is approximately 33 acres, but the apartment project was only 4 acres. So depending on what are you going to use for acreage? The 4 acres used to satisfy the residential requirements for those 250 apartments, or do you use the 33 acres? But then when you use 33 acres, then you're mixing it up with open space requirements. Retail, commercial do not have open space requirements. But then we're assessing, since we're considering that all residential, even though it's not, then you're assessing open space requirements against commercial properties. So there's a kind of a, you know, dichotomy there about, you know, is it residential, is it not, is it all commercial, is it not? So those are things we need to, I thought we need to better define, because right now it's just left up to interpretation on each individual project. And I think we need to somehow come to grips and start defining some of those issues. Now, we sent a package out. There were some things in there that were first cut issues, you know, about one of the things was about how to define housing or dwelling unit density in a mixed-use project. That was just a first cut about looking at, well, just cover the footprint. Paula and I and Kevin met, and you know, and that's where we started brainstorming and coming up with all these other issues about percentages of mixed use. You know, what should be business, how much of the business area should be left business, how much of it could be residential. And like I said, I don't think it was meant to make everything residential in the business district. So,
One of my, I don't mean to interrupt you.
no, go ahead.
One of my concerns was the mall. You know, we need, we have the Main Street shopping area, but we really need shopping for our town. They could cover the entire mall, I'm sure, with apartments, and they'd be happy, but our town doesn't have like a shopping area. So, you know, how much can they
Right.
do at the mall?
Not over,
108.
it has to be maintained at 50% or more commercial. That's the.
Okay.
Now, that can be codified, because that's just from the planning commission that said it has to be 50% commercial.
Right.
But it could be baked into the code. One thing to remember here is that if we come in and say, okay, you can only do, figure your density on those 4 acres you're sitting on, and just get rid of the subdivision,
Correct.
it just goes away.
It just goes away. They just build an apartment building there. They don't need to subdivide the lot out. Does that make sense?
Right.
So then how do you figure it out then?
Then you
Right.
throw a line down and it's, because that's gonna be arbitrary.
That's, yeah, you can't do that. You can't just arbitrarily, basically, because what you would do is you would say, let's take Dartford Mall just as an example, since we're kind of talking about that. It's 30 acres. They don't have to subdivide it. That 3-acre lot where the apartments are, they don't need to do that. They're only doing that as a part of their long-term business plan because they're going to sell that lot off with that apartment. That's their
Right.
goal. They don't need to. So then what they're going to do is that they're going to put an apartment complex there one way or another. You can't arbitrarily draw a line around it and say, I'm going to give you 3 acres and that's all I'm going to consider, because you devalue in their project the overall scheme of the mixed-use development. And you cannot in any way, shape, or form devalue it. It's a takings without just compensation. Does that make sense?
My issue is that I am very disappointed in what they have produced as far as what their mixed-use development is. I know there's apartment building, but then we just have like some boxes drawn on that plan.
You mean as the future, like, vision? I think they're waiting for a lot of factors to take into, this is a long-term project. This is a huge project. This is not something that is going to be produced overnight. This is going to take a long time. So I think there's a lot of factors that could change: interest rates, impact fees, because now we've got that. You know, if that changes, that's going to increase their costs.
The market in general.
The market in general.
Right now, it's residential is everything.
Yeah.
You can't,
Right.
no one's building retail, no one's building office.
I think you mean apartments or everything. I mean, that's all I see. I don't see any home ownership
Well,
pretty much
in
anywhere.
the town of Bel Air, there's not much place to put.
Yeah, I can't put any more
single-family
subdivisions, yeah,
homes.
single families, so.
They could have put townhouses where the standard on bond is going. It may not
They
have
could
been the best dollar value for you, but there are places you could infill. I mean, Hickory Flats, they could have put series of townhomes there. But all I see coming in is apartments. Hickory Flats had initially come in as condos owned, and then they didn't get the parking or something that they needed, and they came back in and are now apartments.
I think
Right.
one of the things, at least in our experience in our practice, which is primarily real estate development work, it kind of goes to what Jim's point was concerning the affordable housing and the impact fees. Not to bring that back up, though, is that people cannot afford single-family dwellings. They can't afford townhouses. When I moved here in 2003, my house values doubled. I moved from Glen Burnie. I mean, I had nothing. So that was a great time for me to buy. If I sold my townhouse today, I would not be able to get another house here in Harford County. I just can't afford it. So what's happening is people younger than me who have college debt, cannot afford it, they can't qualify for a home loan, they're going with apartments. It's just, that's the only affordable option they have. You know, especially when you're paying $2,000, $3,000 a month mortgage on a townhouse. I mean, you know, so that's what we're seeing now. And when we're doing residential closings, and I'm seeing upwards of 8.5% on a residential. I mean, my interest rate's like 3% max. You know, it's nothing. So the times have kind of changed, and I think that's why you're seeing more apartments, Paula.
Clearly the times
Right,
have
so
changed,
changed.
but I've seen them change
and
change
go back.
again. and
Exactly, they
change.
will, it'll flow,
I
it'll come
mean,
in, it'll come out.
I
Each one will have a
remember
market.
double-digit interest rates. When
Yeah.
rates dropped to like 9.5, the
Yeah.
market went crazy. I remember, it might have been '03, there have been several times when people were underwater with their homes.
Yeah.
And they'd have to write a check at the settlement table to get out of their single-family home. So
That's
I
where
just-
the short sales came from, and the foreclosures,
Right.
that's when we
So
were doing
I-
foreclosures, yeah.
I just don't want to see the whole town become rentals and then the market change. And then we have all these rentals and, you know, a transient populace, and we're left with that. What happens then? Everybody wants to live in the new place. What happens to our older apartments that are pretty solid? I mean, they're, you know, nice places to live. They're, you know, I hate to say affordable, but that's kind of relative. I look at apartment rent now, and none of it's affordable as far as I'm concerned. My mortgages were never that large.
Correct,
So-
and that's where it comes in the affordability of housing in
Right,
general.
Right. And
you
I'm not
know.
opposed to apartments, but could we have some variety here?
But that's what they're gonna do. But also keep in mind, you know, when you're talking about density, we're on that, I mean, I'm not gonna go into too much detail. We've already talked about this in closed session before. You're on
Right.
that
Right.
cusp. Okay, there's certain laws that have to do with density and certain implied consequences as a result of reducing density.
That
Whereas-
kind of gets back to the issue that we just previously talked about with the affordable housing, is that if we want to control the unit mix, the uses, you do that with percentages.
Correct.
You don't do it with density.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to see a mixed-use thing that's got like a coffee shop and a million whatever, you know,
Oh,
residential
you
use of
mean
some
like, yeah,
kind,
I see
you
your
know?
point.
And I don't want to see the mall become like basically residential. It's our shopping area.
Correct, but remember, the planning commission took that into consideration during its written opinion, when it issued its opinion. Kevin and I were talking about this, and he was like, oh, yeah, you know, Paula had an idea, you know, did she like that, to keep it, or base the higher percentage on the use of the zoning. The only thing that I would caution you on that is that, remember the process. The Hartford Mall's 50% rule was based upon the fact that the comp plan says, number one, we see a future mixed use out of the Hartford Mall, and number two, this area, including the Hartford Mall, is our economic engine, and we want to keep this all commercial, right?
Right.
So
Because it'll come back.
it'll come back.
In fact, if you look at the definition that the state provided in their affordable housing mix, it looks to that. It anticipates recreation, institutional, other uses, because that's what these are going to turn into.
Yeah.
It's not going to be commercial anymore. You're looking at what some people would refer to as a lifestyle center. And a lot of those things aren't going to be commercial. Now, it may be that you might see a movie theater move in there. We'll see. I haven't been to the movies in a long time, and I'm not sure how many other people have either. But those are the kind of
I have been to the
examples.
movies very recently.
Oh,
so
have
there
you?
are
Well,
still
that's
people
good.
that go to the movies.
But those are the kind of things that I think we need to look at when we're start to examine the definition of mixed use. How is that going to be done? How did the other municipalities can look at mixed use?
And
'Cause
that
I
was
will say,
another thing that we discussed, because I do always want to know, what's the county doing? What's
Right.
Aberdeen doing? What's Howard Grace doing?
Yeah, I've got some of that I provided some of that information to everybody. We went across the board for mixed use for about 10 different places, and that you should have. One thing to remember is I would need to talk to them individually on how they actually calculate the densities that are applied there. I also want to find out, well, if we have 20 units per acre, and that's really a multifamily definition, which is what the affordable housing goes right to. Where does that land with the other jurisdictions in the county? Are we the most dense? Are we less? You know, where is that falling? I'm thinking it's probably more dense, but I think that we can certainly address that again with those percentages. If we say, if the comp plan says this, or if the zoning says this, you have to be a majority of that, meaning a majority of commercial, if you're there, and we would have to be I think, flexible in what the definition of commercial in that context is. Somebody wants to come in and do,
Doctor's offices.
yes.
Yeah, you want
yeah.
that,
It-
you know?
A lot of these other kind of things, somebody wants to build a pickleball facility there. That technically is commercial, you know, we would have to kind of expand what that definition is, because that'll help us out.
Kevin, would
Because it
you-
allows the mall to stay viable, and that's what we're trying to do here. If that mall can't put in residential, if the downtown cannot have residential, you're gonna see deterioration.
I am fine with the mall having residential. They already have it approved. I mean, I've been to the Hunt Valley thing. It's just that all I see at that mall right now is a big apartment building and nothing else. And I'm concerned with where they're going to go with that because we don't really have a firm plan. And I understand that they don't have a firm plan because they haven't gotten that far down the road. But I don't want to see, we need some shopping there, doctor's offices, pickleball courts, whatever. I don't want to see.
In my discussions with them and trying to work out the development agreement and another agreement with the town and trying to move them forward, in no way, shape, or form have they been like, well, we're just going to, knock them all down and put a bunch of apartment buildings. I mean, they know the constrictions that they're under with respect to not only this approval, which I got to hand it to Don Coates. I mean, he came up with the 50% rule. It was just our job to try to figure out how to make that work. But the comp plan really helped us, but they kind of know what they're dealing with. Because we spent a lot of time going through those agreements. to
And if
make sure
that's
it was correct.
baked into the code, it won't matter what any future decisions of the planning commission make, they gotta meet that requirement.
Correct.
And I
so
think
that would
that's a
mean
good
that,
thing
like,
to consider because Don Coates came up with it. That's great. But what if the next project?
right.
No,
And-
yeah.
And if you have something that goes into, say, the tire lot, that would mean that the tire lot has to be 50% commercial. And I don't mind that, but I also do understand that most planners want to see residential in downtown. And why? Because it creates activity. And because it allows people to go, I'm going to go down the street and have a coffee. I'm going to go down and go to the brewery. Having that commercial residential mix is a good thing. And it keeps the downtown viable. And I think it'll do the same for the Hartford Mall, provided they do it the right way, which one of the things that we may want to entertain looking at, and believe me, I don't want to do it this fall, but is to create a quasi-PUD over that.
You're going to kill me.
Which is a planned unit development.
Planned
Yes,
unit development,
planned
yes.
unit development, which, what it does is it says, okay, you do whatever you want, but we have to approve it day
That's
one.
the legislative
Yeah,
body.
it's a legislative body.
body.
You would approve it, and then that way, you know what you're getting. And guaranteed, they're gonna come back and change it, because the market changes, everything else. But there are several examples of those around Maryland that have worked very well.
And think of also, this is kind of the posh thing right now, for lack of a better word. I mean, because we also have standard on bond. And while that project is a little bit more constrained, because obviously it doesn't have the land area that Hartford Mall does, it's still a mixed-use development with multiple buildings. So, what?
Yeah, I guess it is.
It is. They're going to build a brand-new building that's going to have the residences, that's going to have
Yeah, there's a little
commercial,
space like
and
this
then the
wide
little
between the two buildings.
Yeah, it's 3 feet. In fact, we had to do the encroachment. They were
But
the building.
they're not going to be 50% commercial.
No, that was never even
Yeah, they will.
considered.
Santa Barbara.
There'll be
50?
50%
Will they?
commercial.
Okay,
Yeah.
that wasn't
Okay.
a part of their approvals.
It was not part of their.
It wasn't a part of their approval, yeah. It was a part of Hartford Mall, though.
Yeah.
So how much
No,
are
they
those?
have 2 stories on 130, and they have 2 stories on the other. That'll be more than the 3 stories they
Wait,
have left.
Right.
Aren't they going to have floor level retail?
Floor level retail and retail on the highest floor, and then they have 3 in between, but they're, 130 is all
It's-
commercial.
Yeah, it's all commercial.
130 North Bond.
You-
Does-
You're
does that
considering
help?
professional
Yeah.
offices commercial?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
For this
So could
discussion,
you like,
yes.
well,
Yeah,
could
that's
you
what I
define
am.
things could you define things in the negative and say certain percentage
Non-residential.
non-residential?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Is that what you're trying to
but,
say?
yeah, but you obviously wouldn't want a more heavier industrial use with a residential.
the one thing, like,
So-
you could look at the affordable housing, they're excluding industrial.
Industrial, yeah.
Right.
Let's probably follow that lead.
Yeah, let's keep that that way.
Each district has its own permitted uses. So if you just say you just say residential, and then it's the rest is all the other permitted uses for that
Yeah.
district.
But like our permitted uses, let's just, what's the district where Standard on Bond is?
They're
B3A.
B2A.
B3A.
Does the code require that
2A.
to be no more than 50% residential?
Yeah,
So it could have been.
It could have been.
Yeah.
could have been, yeah.
And if we like come in and say it's got to be 50% non-residential, then we're just,
At least 50%.
that's just market manipulation. We're just saying, we're freezing that out, no matter what the economy changes. That would be a hard, fast rule. That
Yes,
would-
yes.
And if the trends continue, that people work remote and, you know, et cetera, if these trends continue, as the foreclosures increase in Manhattan and all the places that can't be filled, if these trends continue, we're taking a gamble. We're saying, we're not gonna let the market dictate, we're going to dictate.
Yes, that's
Yes,
correct.
That's what you're saying.
That is
Okay,
exactly what
yeah,
you're saying.
I'm
Now,
not-
the other
I'm
way
not
is
down
you
with that,
put
yeah.
your faith in the planning commission to come through with
Right.
reasonable limitations like they, in my opinion, like
Right,
they
so-
have with the mall.
So for example, and if you don't know it off the top of your head, that's fine, I'm going to put you on the spot, but how many residential units are left in the swimming pool over at the mall property?
108.
108.
That's
Are
my
you talking
recollection.
about what can be expanded?
Yeah,
That's
he's
right.
acting like additional
Yes,
units.
that's what I computed
Because-
based on, you know,
Right,
some
because the per
calculations.
acreage, they've used up a certain amount on this project, and how much is left in the bank.
Right,
In order
and
to
they,
keep 50%.
that's only if they build on top of the existing commercial. Once they
Okay.
start removing commercial, they're
They s-
now
yeah, they're
screwing with
sliding.
the
Slide down.
balance.
If they take it out, they got to put it back, in other words.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So they could come in and they could take out a portion of the mall. Whatever square footage they're taking out, they would have to put it back in if they're gonna get that 108. Now, most of the time, 108's not worth it. They need to get around 150.
And I want to
So-
point
so-
something out here while you're talking about this percentage, Jim. Okay, number one, with standard on bond, that never came up. Never even was addressed.
Yeah.
It was just a square footage, how much of this, how much of that, and that's it. Planning Commission was like, fine. With Hartford Mall, and he never mentioned it, this planning department never said, hey, this, we want a 50%. The Planning Commission did it on their own and said, no, we want to keep this 50% commercial because the comprehensive plan says, and we're bound by the comp plan, this is what it's supposed to be. So while they were okay with residential, they were not what Paula has described to me. Her fear is that it would turn into a sea of apartment buildings. That's what they didn't want either. So,
Paula, your mandatory minimum percentage wouldn't just be restricted to somewhere like the mall, but any business zone in town would be subject to that. Is
Who
that
wants
right?
to do mixed use?
Who wants to do
that-
mixed
that-
use?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
And it doesn't have to be,
I just think that's playing fire with the marketplace. We could end up with
Yeah.
vacancies in a hollowed-out town.
The only other thing that I'd suggest is go, instead of going with the zoning, is go with comp plan. Because remember, the planning commission is going to look to the comp plan. They're bound by it. So if you say, okay, B3A is commercial, but then the comp plan may anticipate this more going towards residential, like, for example, the Hartford Mall, which is a business, what's B3A? B3A?
Hartford Mall?
B3A?
is B3.
B3.
B3. So I just want to keep that in mind, because the last thing you want to do is have a state law that tells them this is what you have to look at, and then we have a code that sort of indicates that it's making them go in another direction. I just want to point that out.
True, but remember, the comp plan is guidance, because.
The comp plan is guidance for
For-
you. They have to follow it. The planning commission does.
Right, but but in the comp plan, it says the mall was only 120 apartments. That was in
Well,
the
that-
comp plan. So,
Those are numbers
Those
all
are
over the
numbers
place.
that are all over the place.
well,
That wasn't based on anything, any engineering
Right.
submission that was done. That was
Yeah.
just, it's.
I mean, I
basic-
get that all the time. We try to calculate what the yield is for certain underdeveloped properties, and we come up with a density a calculation that is, you know, it has nothing to do with what the owners or the developers may want to do in the future.
Well, then I don't understand what you say that they have to follow the comp plan.
The planning commission has to follow the goals and objectives that are set forward in the comp plan. So, for example, let's say Hartford Mall, okay? It's commercial. Say the Hartford Mall came in and said, we're going to do some sort of industrial use, okay? The comp plan said it anticipated mixed use on that piece, okay? Did it have an estimated number of units? Yeah, they're not bound by that estimated number of units. That's not based on an engineering plan. That was done by an engineer saying this is what our proposal is. So it's a generalized, long-term goals-oriented thing. So the Hartford Mall couldn't come in, they could come in and say, hey, I want to do some other totally different use other than mixed use. The planning commission's responsibility would be look at the comp plan and say, what does the comp plan say? This is not consistent with the comp plan, we're not going to allow it. Same thing if they came in and did, you know, Paula's worst fear in the world, which is to say, I'm going to turn this into a sea of apartments. The planning commission's job is to say, that's not consistent with the comp plan, we're not going to approve that. The density markers for the 30 acres, based on Kevin's calculation, I think is 660 units. That's obviously not going to happen. But if you're just doing the standard numbers, that's what the planning commission came back. If they came in and said, I'm going to do 660 units on the Hartford Mall, the planning commission could not approve that because it's not consistent with the comp plan. If they did, that would be an appealable issue for anybody that wanted to challenge it. Does that
And
make
they
sense?
would also have to overrule themselves
Correct.
from a previous decision.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that help explain it a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, but it seems like we got to follow the letter of the law, the comp plan in some cases, on some issues in there, but not on the others.
But it's because it's not, they don't know. They're anticipating a mixed use. The same thing with standard on bond. It was anticipated to be a mixed use, okay?
Okay?
That doesn't mean it was based on engineered plans as to exactly what the calculations were, either by the developer or by the planning commission. It was just a generalized idea.
One thing that when we're putting these calculations together, we use basically a standard dwelling unit per acre number across certain zones. If those dwelling units, and those yields are to provide for where is the growth going to be in the town? Where's the money need to be to improve the roads? Where does the expansion need to be for water and sewer? That's the kind of calculation that we're trying to provide so that everybody understands exactly where the town's going to grow and what is going to be needed in the future. Whether or not that's 120 or 250 is going to make a big difference moving forward. And that's why there's an allowance to reconsider not reconsider, to augment the comp plan after 5 years, you know, and if the planning commission decides that that's appropriate. But I think one of the things to look at here is how do you want to control the density in places like the mall? My opinion is you want to do it through a percentage of uses rather than density numbers, because that sort of flies in the face of this affordable housing issue, and that's the thing that is kind of concerning to me.
You know, always monkeying with the density on a numbers basis, like we've talked about before, is always opening the door for a Fair Housing Act challenge. That always concerns me. That's something that DOJ and HUD have been absolutely adamant is one of the things that they look at, and I do not want that to cause an issue. Percentages give them a little bit of flexibility in order to say, okay, how am I going to create this? Now, I would not restrict it as far as mixed use are concerned, because you want to, as Kevin said before, keep that open, because it could be institutional uses as far as the commercial, could be retail, could be office. Let them figure it out, whatever that market will bear.
And I'm kind of like, okay with that, figuring that out. I just don't want to see the entire, we're using the mall as example to be.
You
at,
want a
like-
carpet bomb with,
Right, all of it, and
residential.
like a little tiny cafe, you know, for
No,
coffee
and
or something.
Yeah, and
We need
I don't
other
think.
services and shopping areas in our town. That's a huge, huge footprint here.
Yeah, I know, and they know that too. I mean, and the planning commission made sure that it's, I mean, I think they did a great job, you know, and we did a great job writing their opinion. But, you know, it was lock, stock, and barrel with the comp plan, and that's how, you know, they're able to justify that 50%, because otherwise, to be honest with you, that's kind of arbitrary, right? That's
Any number you pick.
any
is kind
number
of
you pick,
arbitrary.
right? But because that comp plan's like, look, this is the commercial center of our town. It needs to be preserved, and historically speaking, it has been that way for years. That is reasonable to say, okay, I'm gonna keep it at the commercial at 50.
One last thing is that the Hartford Mall is sort of a unicorn. Most of the mixed use, when you look at the developments that are probably gonna turn mixed use in the future, Tire Lot, the lot at the corner of Churchville and Bond. I don't want to mention this too loud. The property down at near Broadway. Those, and there's several others too. There's one. There's a unit behind Spartan Services, a property there. Those are. With the exception of that last property, they're likely to become mixed use. The reason they are is because mixed use shares parking. And when you share parking, you're basically you're double dipping. Residential and commercial are sharing the same spaces. That is helpful when you want to maximize, as from a developer's standpoint, maximize your yield. But it's also helpful to the town to be able to maximize tax-paying units that will come through the door. So if you look around, there's not too many places left to develop. Anything that does develop is going to have some incentive. So that's one of the things that, and I agree, I think we can't just bow to the current trend that everything is apartments and everything that is residential, because it is going to change. It's just whether or not you're here and I'm here when that happens.
We can't talk about that, Kevin.
Commissioner Taylor will be here.
That's right, you're in charge.
All right. Anything else on this particular topic at the moment? More work to be done.
Well, that's a point that I wanted to address, is more work, a lot more work to be done, because when you roll in the affordable housing and all that kind of stuff in on top of this, I mean, how are we going to get there? How are we going to revamp? Do we need to put together a small group? What do we want to do? How do we want to go forward to relook at this?
It has to be a really small group, because no more than 2 commissioners can be involved.
Yeah.
And Kevin Small has to be involved. And then, of
Right.
course, oversight is Liz.
I would like to talk to my counterparts, because I think we'll get a lot of information from
I
them.
think that is really a valuable thing to
Okay.
do.
I think what
I might even talk to Baltimore County, because they're struggling with a lot of these issues down there.
I think we need to codify the provisions, certain provisions of the Affordable Housing Act, because they're just, like, we don't have a definition for a mobile home. There's cluster homes, I think it was, medium homes, or whatever it was.
Right.
So we need to get that in the code, because we don't really have a choice. And then once we have that in there, I think that we can go from there. Like, we have to do this. Let's see how it fits in with the other stuff. Does that make sense? But we can certainly talk about it, have a group
Right.
discussion. But as far as like procedure, I think that we need to do that. That's going to go into effect January 1. And the minute we say we doubt it's going to grace Kevin's doorstep, somebody's going to walk in the door, and then we're not going to have it codified.
I can
So-
tell you about one thing. I had somebody come in about 8 months ago and want to put mini houses in a parcel. It's along Moores Mill Road. I told them, we don't have mini houses. They're not permitted. See you later. They may be back.
Are they
Now we do.
Well, what would they come under here?
What?
What would they come under here? The
They would
cluster?
be-
There's clusters.
The cluster
Yeah.
was
They would be,
4.
yeah, they would be clusters, but almost limited to what would be considered a townhouse. So we need to have a definition for that, but we didn't back then. We do now, though.
But, and see, the thing is that if you just don't codify it, it doesn't matter, because they're gonna walk in the door and they're gonna say, I'm putting a mobile home on our one lot, and he's gonna be like, okay, you asked to issue it. Yeah, there's not a choice, because the state law is gonna trump the town code every day. So,
All right, but
because right now, we don't have a definition. So if we don't have a definition, it's not permitted under the town code. That's how Kevin's interpreted the town code. But the state has it, it says that you have to do it, so it has to be codified.
right, which is basically taking what the state's telling us we must put in.
Correct. Yes, now, the
Yeah.
declarations is something that we could talk about. That's something that we can put in to the code. I don't see anything that would prohibit you from doing that and enforcing that in the planning process. So, just a thought.
All right. Well, thank you so
Okay.
much. And now, finally, commissioners' comments.
I'm going to auctioneer right through these because we all want to get out of here. But before we do go, I definitely think that a word of great congratulations and thanks to both the police department and DPW for an outstanding job at the barbecue bash over the weekend. I was there for about a combined 10 hours between Friday and Saturday, and so I was witness to at least a half dozen exemplary incidents of, officers protecting the premises, DPW guys making sure things were running smoothly. Obviously, a special congratulations to the Downtown Alliance for another very successful event, but as I always like to say, it couldn't happen without our guys. So very well done to both of you and your crews. And then briefly, as a housekeeping item, I just wanted to offer up, when we have small things like agenda amendments, those are things that can be done with unanimous consent, I think. So if the chair would ask, are there any objections? And if there are none, assuming unanimous consent, we don't have to make Mr. Krantz go through the rigmarole of having us vote twice. Might, speed up the economy by which we do things. So just a suggestion.
I don't think that's what took so long this evening.
Of course.
Point taken.
Yeah.
I will just like to agree with what Jake said about the barbecue bash and the support that the town gives. You guys do such a great job, and I appreciate it so much. Not only do I, but all the rest of the people who attend. So thank you very much again. Thank you.
Anyone else? We're all talked out. Kudos on the barbecue bash and the great success. Thank you for all the directors other than Director Kevin Small, who controlled the agenda this evening. Thank you for your patience in sitting here, listening to all the things that really don't have a lot to do with your department. At any rate, I think we are finished. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.